I get a lot of people coming forward to me telling me how they used to watch various anti-SJW YouTubers and used to buy into this worldview.
Yeah, don't say.
Of, say, SJWs or feminism being this huge problem, and who are also very ashamed of their former beliefs.
Yeah, no, people get bored. People get impatient. Not everyone. Some of us understand that you can't get too hung up on change. Just exist and you will affect it. But some people really want things to change ASAP. So they grab the nearest trend, and if the world hasn't changed in 18 months, they grab the next one, disavow the previous one, and repeat. One year it's social justice, the next it's anti-social justice, then it's the alt-right or the alt-left, then it's the anti-social justice. It can be anything. They might even form rival gangs of West Side Story shirt lifters and start throwing shit at themselves. Anything goes when you're dealing with the impatient majority.
There's really no reason to feel a sense of shame or embarrassment because you used to hold a set of beliefs you now deem unsubstantiated.
How do you know? I mean, how would you know if you've never admitted you were wrong about something? For a lot of people, neglecting to keep up with the times is a good reason to feel ashamed. I don't necessarily agree, but I can accept why others would. It seems to be how most children operate, and indeed most teenagers, and the social groups to which they belong, because they haven't yet mastered the art of patience. You won't get through to them by telling them there's no reason to be ashamed. That just reveals that you have no idea what they're going through. And what parent has ever successfully convinced their children that this toy is just a fad that they won't care about in a year? Who has ever instantaneously convinced a teenager that their music is shit? No one. So, just let it be. I know you want to sound like the good cop and be all don't feel bad and shit, but it doesn't even work like that.
And here's why. I, and I'm sure many others, got introduced to political YouTube about 2 to 3 years ago without even intending to. Maybe you're just looking for some tips regarding a hobby of yours.
Does Angela Merkel not count as political YouTube? Or do you mean political YouTubers? And by that, do you mean YouTubers of a given political stance?
And out of the blue, you see a recommended video in the corner of the screen that's titled, let's say, Why People Hate Feminism Part 12.
Guess who he's talking about, folks? You know what? Once upon a time it was Trump, Bering. But now it's just a city full of people chanting Trump and a couple of villages full of people chanting Sargon. And we can't hear the Berings because they've all got VPNs.
But the image the word feminism conjures up in your head is women complaining who don't really have a reason to.
And can get people's YouTube channels shut down, even from inside a computer game? Even fictional feminists are commanding more sympathy than humans. The image it conjures is of people who literally show more solidarity with NPCs than with real-life, flesh and blood, non-feminist human beings. But hey, this is clearly getting better before it gets worse.
So out of curiosity...
Big Red is in your Red Dead. And her powers are still intact. The power to pull a fire alarm on you and get away with it. Why the fuck wouldn't that freak you out?
You click the video and find out that your previous assumption was not only correct, but that it even goes further than that.
One more time?
Your previous assumption was not only correct, but that it even goes further than that.
I'm going to charitably chalk up as much as I can to the chance that this is just poor use of English. Not only was I correct, I was incorrect. I think what you're trying to say is, and in the second person, is you had a previous assumption and it turned out to be not just wrong, but an underestimation. And by that I think you're implying that the expected answer should be, is it overestimation? This would be a previous assumption on the part of the first person there. Do you see how messy this statement would be if I wasn't here to tidy it up?
With intersectional social justice warriors holding various positions of power and supposedly seeing everything through an oppressor versus oppressed mindset.
I hope you're not implying that this is an overestimation, and I dearly hope you're not going to run on ahead with that as a previous assumption. But all I have is hope. And booze. And the rest, but you know what I mean. I had my doubts that I could do a response to you, because you're really quite stunningly boring. But I'm using you as practice. If I can make you interesting, maybe I can make Sean and Jen interesting. But good lord, that lad is like Ambien.
So you continue to watch hours of content like this and find other creators who talk about these topics through YouTube's recommended feature.
Nope. Doesn't seem to work for me anymore, if it ever did. They used to have a front page feed exclusively for content liked and favorited by your subscribers. That was the best way to learn more and get connected, but they removed it like 5 years ago. They even used to have the option to place video responses in the comment sections. They removed that like 7 years ago. Remember that, guys? There's a bunch of OGs now going, oh yeah, I remember. I remember. There used to be all manner of ways for even the smallest groups to get together and get each other in touch with each other. But it all got gutted, one panel at a time, until all we had left was the recommendation algorithm. And then they gutted that too. I'm not surprised you don't know any of this, if you only found the political section of this website 2 to 3 years ago. You talk to an old fag every now and again, you'll get the bigger picture. By the way, I found your channel because it was recommended.
You're going to check out more of Sam Harris and maybe even buy a book of his.
Okay, the plot slowly thickens. You're talking about people who've never heard of Sam Harris before. You've been talking to people who weren't here 13 years ago when that book came out, or who weren't here 8 years ago when religion versus atheism was still the in vogue argument on YouTube. Have you mostly been talking to people who 8 years ago were spending most of their days in a SpongeBob SquarePants onesie? Yeah, you may have struck a sweetie slick there.
You get to learn about this video, and this video, and this video.
And this hate crime law, and that hate crime law, and that witch hunt, and that academic paper, and this academic paper, and you're never quite sure which ones are the hoaxes.
And the more you learn from all these new people you discover,
I agree with that.
The better you feel about your new political identity.
What political identity? Anti-SJW may be a political term, but I certainly don't consider it an identity that I would wear on any of my garments, let alone my sleeve. I prefer not to identify as anti-anything, especially not something as fuzzily defined as social justice. I figured out some time ago that if I want to tell any of these so-called social justice warriors what I think, all I have to do is advocate for men's rights. Or indeed simply declare myself a men's rights advocate. And those social justice warriors will do the honour of telling me what they think. And that's a more important thing to hear than anything I have to say. And wouldn't it be convoluted if I conjured the term anti-MRA and then I tarred with this brush everyone who doesn't take my fancy? Even if it's technically true, even if I reserve the term for people who actively speak out against men's human rights, it would still be an obviously lazy contrivance if I collectively referred to any amount of them as anti-MRAs. I wouldn't get away with it. As well I shouldn't. I should be addressing the arguments, not the vessels having them. Seems like such a minor thing, doesn't it? Like a vanishing point of academic grammar. But microscopic things can have devastating effects on the macro world. Can't they, Mr. Arrows? Can I call you Mr. A?
It feels good. It feels good. It feels good.
Fuck it, I'm not in the mood.
When Ben Shapiro says the 3 things you have to do to not screw up your life are finishing school, get a job, and not have kids out of wedlock, it feels good.
No, it doesn't. It reminds you of hard work. These things all have an appreciable level of difficulty. They do not feel good. But delayed gratification has a good track record for setting up a decent life, statistically speaking. That's the point. And those are the facts. And they still don't care about your feelings. Okay, Max. The idea.
And while you continue to take part in the discussion around feminism, Islam, and political correctness, there's a set of beliefs that you acquire.
Or a set of beliefs that you lose. Since you've chosen to collectivize your subject as anti SJWs, the least you can do is acknowledge that by your own definition, they have not acquired a set of beliefs. They have, I don't know, what's the word? Deconverted from a set of beliefs that we call social justice. I mean, if you can't call us all MRAs and you can't call us all white supremacists, then you're going to have to come up with something that's anti-something, and then, you're going to call us all white supremacists. Interesting.
Like Black Lives Matter is a regressive movement, or that the anti-fascists are the real fascists, or that feminism in the Western world is an antiquated idea.
Okay, so, called it. Sir, I have no faith or trust in the three institutions you just mentioned. Not Black Lives Matter, not Antifa, and not feminism. None has proved itself worthy of its preceding reputation. Now, I'm beginning to wonder if you're actually rather good with English and you're doing this on purpose. You don't get to define atheism as a religion. You don't get to define non-astrology as a superstition. And you don't get to define anti the thing you believe as believing another thing. Okay? We all came out of a fucking void here. But we have to at least agree together that not thing is not thing.
To me, there's really no other connection between the various anti-SJW or skeptic YouTubers or whatever you want to call it, other than that they are against the nebulous concept of the SJW.
And back we go, same as the first. Don't get sick on the runway!
Feminism, anti-fascist, Black Lives Matter.
It is not a nebulous concept if you have already identified three objects in its orbit. What you have there is what cosmologists would call a system. This is a nebulous concept.
The various anti-SJW or skeptic YouTubers or whatever you want to call it.
That's extremely nebulous, isn't it? You've got a long list of people there, haven't you? And it includes people who have never liked or agreed with each other and are still throwing shit at each other in public to this day. A lot of them are disavowing any connection with the skeptics or the anti-SJWs, but it's not going to do them any good since we are indeed including...
whatever you want to call it.
Whatever you want to call it. Whether it's liberalism or internet blood spots. They're all the same Nazis at the end of the day, aren't they? Look, I don't want to be a massive AIDS pig or nothing, but what do you mean by nebulous concept that is not demonstrated in the definition? Whatever you want to call it. How about heretic? Skeptic. It works. Yeah, skeptic works better these days, doesn't it? You're right. It's definitely not nebulous.
You might watch a Social Justice the Musical video because it's funny and very competently made, but it also delivers a very clear political agenda.
Songwriters have been doing that for years. You what? Wrong agenda. Okay.
And that's usually the problem with this kind of content. You come for the laughs and the entertainment, but what sticks in your head isn't necessarily a pro-right agenda, but an anti-left one.
Bingo. Satire doesn't do pro, it only does anti, and it's usually anti the biggest shit that's happening right here, right now. Sometimes that'll be left-wing, sometimes it'll be right-wing, and sometimes it'll just be those adorable little opportunists in the anti-whatever-you-want-to-call-it community.
Where it gets even more worrisome, though, is when this kind of anti-SJW politics is being sold as an alternative to the mainstream media.
What would be worrisome would be if the mainstream media indeed represented and or is represented by SJWs. It would only be logically inherent that the alternative to it is non-SJWs. If only we had an example of what we call the mainstream media being operated by what we call SJWs.
I bet most of you remember when in February 2017 the Wall Street Journal reported on PewDiePie's ironic anti-Semitism.
If that doesn't count, then what the fuck does? And they're still doing it. The SJWs in the WSJ, they're still getting channels skewered to death on a whim. They're even doing it to people who are muttering, SJWs are over, while they're getting murdered by SJWs. It's so fucking sad. Maybe I can't commit to Wall Street Journal kills kids, but they certainly torture the ones on YouTube. I mean, look at the poor bastards. They're frothing at the mouth. They don't deserve this.
I remember very vividly how this was framed as an attack on alternative media because traditional media outlets can't keep up with people in their bedrooms. That's not my phrasing, by the way. That is taken from one of the videos.
Bedrooms may have amateur connotations, but as economic models go, they are unbeatable. because they can and do operate on no budget. The old media cannot. They have to keep overpaying each other. This is why the Bronze Age died, folks. Because they couldn't keep up with the people who had a smelter in their bedroom.
And I personally always found that quite silly, to be honest.
Well, maybe you should get with the times, you fucking reactionary.
60% of the readership of the Wall Street Journal belongs to the upper management, are over 55 years old, and have an average net worth of $2.1 million.
Yes, Mr. A. Rich old people who are used to the old media and maybe even made their fortune in it, and would not like it if that fortune began to dry up, do you see?
It's very hard to imagine for me that someone would cancel his Wall Street Journal online access, which costs $75 a year, to substitute it with watching PewDiePie videos or listen to some dude talk about how SJWs ruined the Ghostbusters reboot.
I don't think anyone was trying to say that PewDiePie and the Wall Street Journal are competing for the same audience demographic. I don't think anyone is that stupid, except perhaps you and the straw anti-men you invent in your head when you need to. Newspapers, as everyone knows, are mostly the properties of a small handful of parent companies with a wide variety of audience demographics. They are different from the handfuls of parent companies with online properties like YouTube and Facebook. Completely different medium, completely different model, completely different place in history. That's why we can refer to them in the shorthands of old media and new media. Old tyrants are generally unwelcoming to new regimes, and when they sense danger, they will brandish their most powerful weapon, propaganda, which, unlike satire, can be pro or anti, or indeed both. Speaking of which...
And this is where we get to this report.
Don't care, wasn't in it. Ha! And what's more, there's nobody in that network who has pissed me off enough to make a video about them. I don't know what kind of weird coincidence that is, but hey, don't care, wasn't in it. Not dangerous, you see? They only put dangerous people on their pedestals and in their zoos, right? Well, it's almost paradoxical, isn't it? How dangerous can you really be from this far under the radar? Or is that exactly what I would say? But in any case, I think I would rather address the monotonous voices in the control left than the, shall we say, excitable voices that have found themselves pissing about in no man's land. Largely because I can address all the same issues anyway. It's the issue of people who won't play ball, and the masses of NPCs on either side of us who won't play ball either, but insist that everyone else does. It's complicated. Sorry, aliens. You gotta keep on hovering for now. This is not over. It's not even close to over. Over my ass. It's right bloody under. For the love of God, my anus is bleeding.
So why are men afraid? They live in a culture which terrorizes them. They live in a culture which demonizes them, and which hides this under all kinds of pseudo-respectable and toleration-based ideologies. We are constantly being pummeled with images and ideas of men which destroys our sense of masculinity. It's amazing how a trope can be adopted, and suddenly you cannot now even, I defy any of you, think the word masculinity without the word toxic coming in one or other side of it. Like a Google search. This is what they've done. Because I started off thinking that this was an oversight. I thought that this is because people have overlooked something. And then I realized, no, they haven't overlooked anything. This is intentional.
So that's how you stop things. You don't stop things through government petitions. You stop them through music, right, dear?
I've been doing night shifts while you sleep, then decorate the living room while you put up your feet. Mr. Prehistoric made the wheel, then with bricks and mortar civilization was revealed. A handshake, big mistake. You can hashtag me too and claim that it's rape, sex, crimes, redefined as catcalling to you. We're bitch slapped and can't hit back, cause we end up in a courtroom and it's us that gets flack. Don't throw gender roles out into the blue.
Royal Courts of Justice. Royal Courts of Justice is the March meeting. The venue is in Leicester Square. I will... Yeah, and shut up.
Yeah, what worries me is that these people walk amongst us.